Welcome back to Outrage Science Bites, where we break down the science behind our polarized political environment in bite-sized episodes. I'm your host, David Beckmeyer. This week, we're diving into the psychology of polarization. Today's topic is all about the blind spot, why we think we have a monopoly on the facts. Let's face it, we've all been there. You're in a heated argument, convinced you've got the facts on your side, yet the other person is equally sure they do too. It's a maddening standoff, right? So why does this happen? Why do we cling to our beliefs even when faced with contradicting evidence? The answer lies deep in our psychology. Let's start by hearing from Åsa Wikforss, who has a fascinating take on what she calls knowledge resistance.
What knowledge resistance, as a general phenomenon, is the tendency to resist available knowledge, right? So you can study that from different disciplines, and what the psychologists do, they tell us what are the mechanisms that drive this type of evidence resistance, because that really is what it is. It's resisting available evidence. There's knowledge you could have if you just took in the evidence, but you resist it. And then it's a perfectly empirical question that's up to the psychologists to investigate what are the psychological mechanisms that drive this phenomenon. And the things you mentioned are all candidate mechanisms, right? It may not be one, it may be several. So confirmation bias is one of them. Certainly, which is the tendency to do what we can to confirm what we already believe. But there's also a very prominent mechanism is this thing called motivated reasoning. And it's really interesting because often people say, well, it shows people are stupid and irrational, but it's not really like that, because motivated reasoning involves employing your reasoning skills as best as you can to defend a belief that has become valuable to you. It is irrational because you defend the belief against, evidence that comes against it, but you use your reasoning capacities to give reasons why you don't have to change your belief. So it's not as if we sort of point blank resist knowledge. We employ our reasoning capacities to defend our beliefs that we have come to care about. And it could be any kind of beliefs, right? It doesn't have to do with politics. It could be beliefs about, our children, how excellent they are and wonderful in every respect. And we don't want to take in evidence against those beliefs, right? Or beliefs about how, our own skills and or capacities and so on. That we have the greatest audience ever, as a famous president insisted in believing, or at least saying. So these kinds of beliefs can become valuable for whatever reason, and then these mechanisms can kick in, and it can be different mechanisms, and that's the kind of thing that psychology investigates. When you study this sort of thing, there's also the talk of fact resistance. I prefer the term knowledge resistance, and they say, oh, you're saying that some people are fact resistant. And I'm saying, no, we're not saying that some people have this as a trait. This is a phenomenon that can happen to anyone. It's a psychological mechanism, or few mechanisms that we have within us that can kick in if the circumstances are of a certain sort. It can happen to anyone. So it's not as if there's certain types of people that are affected by this only.
It's important to note that knowledge resistance isn't just something other people have. It's not a character flaw or an intellectual deficit. It's something we're all susceptible to under the right circumstances. It's more than just rejecting facts. It's about how our brains are wired to protect beliefs that feel important to us, often through mechanisms like confirmation bias or motivated reasoning. When our beliefs become part of our identity, it's as if our minds are on the defense, protecting those beliefs at all costs. This is where that stubborn refusal to accept contradictory evidence comes in. But it doesn't end there. Even when we present someone with all the facts, scientific studies, expert opinions, you name it, there's no guarantee they'll come around. So how do we move beyond this stalemate? Here's David McRaney to help us understand why bombarding someone with facts rarely works.
You can pass a lot of information to a person and they can accept all of it. And they can even admit to being factually incorrect about a lot of things and be updated in that way. But it won't really change their mind in the way you thought it would. And if you're wondering, how could that be? I mean, imagine that I walk up to you with a flyer that says, did you know the Earth's actually flat? Here you go. Here's a bunch of bullet points. You should look at this. Like, there's no way. First of all, I'm probably going to throw that in the garbage. But even if I do read it, even if there are things on there I didn't know, like you listed a lot of things that are actually true scientifically, it's not going to snap me into seeing the world the way that you see it, because I'm not driven by the same motivations you're driven by, and that's missing from the conversation. And your objective was to prove that your way of seeing it is the way to see it. Even if you won that debate, you lose that debate. The idea that I'm trying to square off face to face with you in a way that my subjective reality will become your subjective reality, you would lose the opportunity to understand, why do we see it differently?
We all need to internalize this. Facts alone aren't enough. It's a humbling reality check. You can't simply win an argument by being right. People don't just abandon their beliefs because they've been proven wrong. They hold on to them because their beliefs often reflect their core values, their identity. This means that when we argue or debate, what we think is a logical battle of facts is actually something much deeper. It's a struggle over values, motivations, and worldviews. When we approach conversations with the goal of winning, we might win the argument, but lose the opportunity for meaningful connection or understanding. So what's the takeaway here? If we want to get past our blind spots and foster real conversations, we have to move away from treating debates as competitions. Instead, it's about recognizing that other people's perspectives are just as shaped by their experiences and motivations as ours are. Thanks for joining me today on Outrage Science Bites. We've unpacked some powerful psychological insights into why we resist facts and why debates so often leave us frustrated and at an impasse. The next time you find yourself in a disagreement, think about what's driving both your own and the other person's beliefs. Instead of aiming to win, try to understand. If you enjoyed today's episode, you may want to check out the long-form Outrage Overload podcast. Visit outrageoverload.net for past episodes, links, and contact information. Be sure to tune in tomorrow as we wrap up this week on the psychology of polarization with a discussion about building bridges, strategies for overcoming polarization.